I come across as a perfectly normal individual. I hold down a job, I've graduated a master's, I have a social circle, so I don't look like someone who struggles with these things. But that's because I'm putting in a ton of effort to manage my nervous system. Hello, everyone. I'm Nope. I am 24 and a woman from Belgium.
Meet Alicia Meneses Maples.
You're here. I am so happy to see you.
Her TEDx talk has set a global viral trend about glass children. She's helped millions of hurting glass children around the world feel seen. You've seen her on NBC, CNN.com, and countless online articles. Here is your host, Alicia Meneses Maples.
Welcome to the I See Glass Children podcast. This is the place where we boldly dig into all things related to the glass child experience. We own our stories without shame, we pursue our healing, and we claim our value independent of others' thoughts, feelings, or expectations. Because you are important to me, I have to give you a warning. Some of the things you hear on the I See Glass Children podcast may be triggering for you, especially if you experience childhood trauma and neglect. And while I will occasionally have mental health professionals as special guests, I am not a licensed therapist, and this podcast is never meant to be a substitute for a supportive and healing relationship with a professional counselor. I'm your host, Alicia Meneses Maples. I am a glass child, and I see you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Alicia Meneses Maples, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the I See Glass Children podcast. And today I am beyond excited because we have a very special guest, and her name is Nope. Nope is the creator of the Reddit group Glass Children, which has made a tremendous difference in the lives of so many people. Welcome to the podcast, Nope.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, and I was beyond thrilled when I first realized who you were on the subreddit.
Thank you. It's one of my favorite groups to be in because the emotions and the stories are so raw and so real. And you have made a tremendous difference in the lives of so many. I've interviewed many people that have come from the Reddit group, all ages, all countries. And so you're making a tremendous difference in the lives of glass children throughout the world. Thank you.
Coming from you, that is probably one of the highest compliments, I think.
We're sisters in this together. Yeah. So, no, if you can, tell everybody a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your age, and then we'll start talking about your story.
So, as I mentioned, I'm a woman and I'm 24 years old. While my nationality is Belgian, I grew up abroad for a large majority. I lived in a few countries in Asia, but my later teenage years were mostly spent in Belgium. I just recently finished a master program and now work in a different country as a conservationist, which is something I've always wanted to do. So I'm incredibly happy with that. It allows me to do a lot of traveling and spend a lot of time in nature, which are two of my favorite things. Outside of that, I'm really into fantasy. Some might call it escapism, but I just love anything with a good dragon in it. And despite protesting a lot when I was younger, journaling and exercise has become two very important parts of my current life. It started out as kind of like a healing thing, but now it's something I've incorporated day to day.
That's wonderful. Tell us a little bit about your sibling.
So I have two siblings. I'm the oldest. The middle we'll call Alex. They're quite typical, but then we have Ali. She's the youngest. She was adopted when she was a few months old from Asia. And she has some severe mental and emotional handicaps, Unfortunately, there is no such thing as a diagnosis for us. We've gone to many psychologists and psychiatrists, but essentially the problem is too complex. It's a cacophony of things. The best way to describe it is that Ellie has the mental capacity of a 4-year-old, maybe a 6-year-old, despite being in her early 20s herself. And she deals with a lot of emotional trauma as well, meaning she can lash out and she struggles controlling her fight and flight instincts quite badly.
Can you describe for us a little bit about her behaviors? And I'm asking this question because for people who are not in high needs families, it's difficult for them to understand or imagine what it's like day to day to be in a home where there is a high needs sibling. Can you describe some of that for us?
Yeah, of course. So it has changed a lot. Some of the key behaviors remain the same. Growing up, she wouldn't sleep the way that a baby would cry throughout the night. She continued well into ages 6 to 8, which was very tough onto my parents. As I mentioned before, she struggles regulating her flight or fight instinct. So when she gets triggered, which is usually some kind of overstimulation, or she doesn't get her way, which sounds crude, but that's how it goes. She has what we call a tantrum, which is throwing herself on the ground, screaming, hitting things, scratching at herself. She kind of loses the ability to differentiate between herself, her body, the environment, and others, which means she often hurts herself quite badly. She has an incredible pain threshold. So she can scratch and scratch and scratch, far beyond what you could imagine. So she has quite a few scars from that. But during those, she can also hurt others. It's not intentional, but she has caused a lot of bruises, bites, hits, kicks, that kind of stuff throughout the years. So those tantrums were really the main problem growing up because they were so frequent. She was intellectually disabled as well, so she would have to go to a different school, but really that didn't bother us too much. I think it was probably a bit heartbreaking for my parents mainly, but the emotional challenges that came with her were the ones that were difficult to deal with. Then when she went into her teenage years, is when it really kind of went off the rails because you had a young girl, a young woman experiencing all the typical hormones and desires of a teenager, but with the ability to regulate themselves as a 4-year-old and ability to sense danger as a 4-year-old. So that was very dangerous for her. And meant she would try and reach out to strangers online. She was trying to find a romantic connection. She wanted independence. She wanted to go out to town like me and Alex were doing. So she'd run away. She did a lot of, that kind of stuff where it was very difficult to monitor her and keep her on track. And especially that a lot of these things were happening during COVID years. So she didn't understand the lockdown, which aggravated everything a lot. Um, so there was a lot of trying to get the police involved to try and find her when she went missing. She got gravely injured during one of her escape attempts, not realizing that the action she took was quite dangerous. She wasn't resulting in her being in a wheelchair for 3 years. Now, the injury itself wasn't that catastrophic. I mean, it was really bad, but because she would scratch and have these tantrums, the injury couldn't heal. So that's why she ended up being stuck like that for so long. She's currently quite heavily medicated, which was because of that injury. They needed her leg to heal, so they couldn't afford her to essentially have tantrums. It is healed now. She walks, she runs, so that's quite good. And because of that medication, she has calmed down a lot, but they're hoping to get her off the medication to a degree because it has also flattened her personality quite badly. So yeah, a range of, behaviors really.
Wow. Um, how old were you when you started witnessing the tantrums?
Well, they were always kind of there, but when you have a small child, it's kind of, a baby will scream and cry, so you won't really realize something's different. She might have done it a bit more, But for a while, we kind of just put it down to her struggling because she is adopted and she's transracially adopted. That itself comes with trauma and can often lead to developmental delays and emotional problems. And especially 20 years ago, there was very little understanding of these things. So for a very long time, these behaviors were considered almost normal due to her situation. It wasn't until the age of her being maybe 6 and I was around 10 that the realization that this really wasn't normal started to kick in. By then, it kind of became obvious that this was quite severe. By then, she was also starting to get a lot of scars because of the scratching and stuff. So I think that's kind of when realization hit for everyone in the family.
No, I'm sitting here quietly and I am imagining being 10, 12, 13 years old and watching my little sister go through this. It it had to be terrifying.
It was very confusing, especially because no one knew what was going on. There was no support network, especially not in Belgium at that time. So my family was kind of left to their own devices. And when we did get help, that help actually turned out to be quite detrimental. No one was at fault for it, but the system just weren't in place. My parents were also struggling badly with it. My father was away often for work, so it was usually my mom. And later realized was incredibly sleep deprived. So she would struggle as well badly to try and fix these issues. So it was kind of, yeah, it was very, very chaotic and a lot of outbursts would happen at home. So for a young kid, that was very stressful. And my other younger sibling, Alex, also, would struggle with it. So it was a lot of emotions to manage in the house.
Right. Not to mention your own emotions.
Yeah. They were definitely all over the place. Most of the time when I was much younger, I very much had the older sister role. I was the big sister and that was my little sister. So we got on really, really well for the longest time. And I was very protective of her. We used to joke that I was the only one who could understand her because she would often mumble and stammer. So it was difficult to understand what she was saying, but I somehow could. So I felt very protective and of her when she was in school with us at the start before she went to a different school. And it was difficult being the oldest sibling because I felt like I had to protect both her, but also Alex, and try and make sure that, they were both okay when these things happened, which was tricky.
And nope, who is protecting you?
I came to that realization much later that, yeah, it was very much me, myself, and I for a while. My parents loved them. They really, really tried, but they had to assume we were okay. It was only, I think, 2 years ago, I had a discussion with them where they realized that we would often be awake when my sister would have these tantrums at night. Um, Imagine a little 6-year-old screaming her head off. It's difficult to sleep through. But my parents were dealing with this on like a nightly basis, especially my mom. They were exhausted and they just assumed we slept through it. And it was only recently that they realized we didn't and that we were often scared during those nights. And they felt tremendous guilt, which, it's not really their fault. But yeah, a lot of the times we were left to deal with it on our own.
At what point did you start coming to terms with how you grew up and the impact that it was having on you as an individual?
I think my healing journey, if I'll put it that way, probably only started 3 years ago, when I left home. So I decided to travel. I took a gap year and I studied abroad for the last few years. And that distance was so important for me, getting a moment to breathe away from the chaos. I initially felt quite guilty because I knew the chaos was still there, but I wasn't there to help. But I also realized, I had to take care of myself. At that point, I had already gone to therapy for a while, so I had quite a few ways to help myself. I had been taught techniques, but that actual distance that allowed me to process a lot, it allowed me to think without being bombarded by new things. And that really helped me kind of come to terms with everything. It allowed me to come to terms with my relationships with my family, and it improved the relationships with my family immensely. And it allowed me to have very honest conversations with my parents, which were incredibly important for me to start kind of moving past a lot of the negative emotions associated with it. I think it was also very good for them. They benefited from it, and yeah, it's only in the recent last year that I've actively wanted to go see and seek out my sister.
You mentioned therapy. Can you share what was it that triggered you to say, I want therapy, I want to get some help?
It wasn't the most straightforward journey. The first time I went to therapy, I was 15. I was being bullied in school, and life at home was stressful because my sister was just started to go into puberty, and I was 15. So, and I essentially had a mental breakdown. I completely shut down. I dissociated so far away that I was unresponsive to stimuli for a little bit there. So obviously my parents panicked. And we have a history of psychological issues in my family. So they immediately were very, very concerned by this. So they actually brought me to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrists put me on a scale and laughed at me and said I was being a typical 15-year-old teenager. So you can imagine that my start with therapy wasn't the best one. I actually continued going to a psychologist for a little bit after that, but it really wasn't very helpful. I quit quite soon after, and it wasn't until I was 18 that I decided to go by myself because I had another stress breakdown, essentially. I was facing my first ever exams at university, and I think that external stressor pushed me over the edge, and I, again, kind of had a dissociative episode that really freaked me out. And I realized this is not a normal way to be reacting to stress. So I sought out a therapist and then went to therapy for 3 years. And it was originally only every month, but then there was periods where I was going every week. There was periods where I didn't go for a few months at a time, always to the same person. Bless him, he was quite young. And I originally went to him for stress with studying. So he got a very big surprise when everything else started to come out. But it was instrumental to teaching me how to kind of heal and help myself.
We don't often understand why we behave the way we do as adults. But why is that? Because we've learned to disconnect or disassociate our adult behaviors from our childhood experience. Dissociation isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. It's the quiet way our brains protect us by tucking painful memories into hidden corners so we can keep functioning. And if what we lived through was constant, if the chaos, neglect, or fear was normal, then we didn't recognize it as trauma. We didn't call it trauma. We called it our role, our family, or just the way things were. We called it life. So when we as glass children become adults and start noticing patterns like shutting down emotionally, avoiding conflict at all costs, or not being able to name what we feel, we don't always realize this is not random. It's rooted.
Was it a surprise for you?
To a degree, yes. I didn't realize just how not normal certain things had been, how not normal some of my coping strategies were. And I didn't realize where all of it came from. When I was 15, during that initial time period, I was ridiculously angry at my sibling and at my parents. Like, hate would be an appropriate word to use there. Never showed it externally, but I was mad because I did realize that this all had had an impact on me. But by 18, that had quieted a little bit. And it wasn't until I started talking about why I was feeling stressed and why I didn't want to seek help and why I was bottling it all up so much that we realized, like, oh, there's this overarching problem. And he actually diagnosed me with complex post-traumatic stress disorder after 2 years, because of all the stories that came out and all of the ways that I was responding to things.
This is, I think, a very important aspect of healing to talk about because we, I think, to survive our circumstances, and it may be a little more complicated than that, but I'll put it this way: to survive our circumstances as children, we do dissociate from what's happening. In addition to that, what's happening in our homes is it's normalized. So you add on top of that the layer of not feeling the freedom to express our emotions, which is typical in most child households. All of that leads up to we become quite masterful, I think, at not recognizing our pain or where our pain is coming from. And that's why I asked if it was a surprise to you in therapy to realize, wait a minute, it's not just that I'm stressed out about my exams at university. There are other things, a lot of other things that are contributing to why you were behaving that way.
Yeah, it definitely never was given the name
Yeah.
trauma, before I went there. And it is, as you say, it's normalized because it is our normal. It is, it's your childhood. And I won't say I had a bad childhood. In fact, I had a very good one, but there was also a substantial amount of bad stuff going on there. And yeah, kind of going into that and having someone, especially a professional, point out, hey, this was not a normal experience and it's okay that you were shaken up by that. And yeah, that probably has long-term effects, was very surprising and very validating. I'd had a few surprise moments like that before. The first time I really told a friend about some of the stuff that was happening at home when I was 17 caused her to cry and break down, because she had no idea. And well, I had my friends come over and we all went swimming and my sister came along and my mom told me, hey, maybe warn them that your sister has scars on her leg. So I did, and they were utterly shocked because I had clearly undersold the damage. And they didn't, that day they saw my sister have a meltdown for the first time. And people underestimate what that actually is. So they saw it for the first time and they were completely shocked. And for me, it was a non incident. I, on my hand now, have two small scars from that day from my sister, but that was just completely normal. And to see other people have such a reaction to it kind of, validated a lot of those feelings that I was having. And then having a psychologist point out and say, like, this is not normal.
It's interesting that you say that because I've spoken with several, as you know, adult glass children, and for many of them, the realization of the reality of what was happening in their homes did not come until someone from the outside witnessed it, saw it, or in one particular case, I remember speaking to a young woman who's in her early 20s, and she was just telling a story to her partner, an everyday story about what happened when she was growing up. And he was absolutely shaken by what she shared. And for her, that was one of her first moments of realizing, oh, I guess that was difficult what I went through. I guess that was not really normal what I went through. So thank you for talking about this because I think the world has a hard time understanding why we can present ourselves as being okay, why we can be really successful in vocations or successful in school and on the outside look like everything is just fine, but on the inside, we're really cratering.
Yeah, it is interesting because I have made a bunch of new connections in recent months due to my job, and I have a partner of just under a year now. So I made new friends, and whenever you meet new people, you end up talking about family. So you have to kind of give a little speech about your sibling, and it's always very airy, and you don't want to go into any details. But in the occasions that I have gone in slightly more detail, usually the other person ends up quiet, kind of shocked, or they want to give you a hug, and it's this really weird situation where you're like, yeah, okay." Especially now that feeling a bit more controlled over everything, it's just like, okay, yeah, we'll hug, and yeah, I know it sucked. Kind of, yeah, it makes it a little bit awkward sometimes.
Wow. Yeah, I understand. I would love to know and have you tell everybody what prompted you to create the Reddit group.
It was a bit spontaneous, really. I had been looking for support groups. I wanted to see if there was anything out there, and there just didn't really seem to be anything. I believe at that time maybe there was a Facebook group here and there, but most of them were still kind of catered towards, look at how amazing my sibling is for doing this. And despite all of the challenges, it was incredibly positive. And I don't want to be negative about these spaces because I think they're also very important. But what I was looking for was a place where I could say, I hate everything and everyone. I am so mad. This is so unfair. I am mad and I want to break something. And I wanted to be able to really just say everything I was feeling. I didn't want to be like, oh, this positive thing happened with my sibling. I wanted to say, like, my sibling did this today. And I had the incredible urge to push her down a flight of stairs. I would never do that. I love my sister, but you get those thoughts and you get those feelings, and you very rarely get to share them. Um, so I was looking, couldn't find them, and I decided, you know what, might as well just try and make one and see what happens. I didn't really know what I was doing. I picked the term glass child because I was introduced to it through your TED Talk, and that TED Talk had always stuck with me. If I rewatch it, I cry, so I don't do it too often. And I decided, I'll make this platform and see what happens. And I would post in it. And I didn't really promote it very much, but I did try initially to just see. And I was very surprised that it actually took off. I never expected it to do so.
How long ago was that?
I believe it was in May of 2021, which, yeah, was kind of peak having some severe emotional behavioral issues due to her teenage years. So that's when I felt that need to kind of share that. I was like, I didn't have anyone to share it with in person. I had my psychiatrist, but I was like, I want this. I need to say it again and again and again, and maybe then it will feel better. So a while ago now, yeah.
I can testify to the fact that that group has become a safe haven for people to express any emotion that they're feeling, which is such a gift because many of us, as we were growing up, as I mentioned, were not allowed to express our feelings. Either self-imposed, we didn't want to express our emotions because we didn't want to contribute to already a difficult situation in our homes, or if we did express, our emotions were not received well by our parents because our parents were already overwhelmed with the situation and their own emotions. So, having a place to be able to freely state whatever it is that you're thinking or that you're feeling has been a gift to so many. And I'm thankful that you created that subreddit. And boy, I wish that it had existed when I was growing up.
When it started to grow, I was just kind of blown away by the amount of people sharing stories that were all unique, but those feelings, those emotions, those core experiences, they were so shared between everyone. And you could see these connections of people going in the comments and being like, "You're not alone. I have felt this." It was just so incredible. And when it started to take off, I was a bit worried that, Reddit can be a toxic place sometimes, that this would turn, that this would become, I don't know, something that I didn't want it to be. But the community has just been so great, and they're so responsive, and there's some very, very active members. And I'm not always capable of moderating it. Like, I can't always be there day to day. And whenever something happens, and if I've missed it, people are so good at just not just pointing it out, but pointing it out gently and asking for assistance. And if I am unsure about what to do, I know I can just ask the community and they'll provide feedback. And it's really great to see this group, because we've had a few people come in and post negative or downvote here and there, but it really hasn't happened frequently. And whenever that happens, the group has also been very good at just reporting and ignoring and downvoting those people so that I can see that it's happening and remove them, because it is a safe space and those people shouldn't ruin that, you know?
Yes. And by the way, for everybody listening, we will put the link to the subreddit in the show notes. So if you are a glass child, you're free to join and be part of this thriving and growing community. When I describe it to people, nope, I say, I describe it as beautifully raw and beautifully brutal in its honesty.
That's amazing. That's really what I wanted it to be honest.
You accomplished it. You accomplished
Yeah, it's definitely, I think I was worried about it because it's a space that if you don't know what's going on, you can quickly misunderstand. Um, so I was worried that would happen, but everyone who's joined has been very open-minded, and probably because we all share that experience, that hasn't happened, and I'm so, so happy for that.
There's a depth of understanding that sometimes just doesn't need to be articulated. And we're able to support each other when we're sharing the rawness of our emotions and our thoughts. So yeah, it's a tremendous gift. Another question that I would like to ask you, you're doing this work through the subreddit with adult glass children. I would like to know from you if you had the opportunity to speak to parents who have a high needs child and who have other children that are not high needs. What advice would you give to them?
I know it's not easy, but try and make time. Try and make time and space for the other children in your household. Um, to be able to build that connection, to build the connection needed for vulnerability. Avoid phrases like just, be good and be okay, and those kind of things, because if you're in a moment of stress and you tell your child to just be okay, they will internalize that as in they have to be okay for you to be okay as well. They'll start feeling responsible for your feelings. And because they're going through the same things you're going through, but they don't have the emotional capacity to deal with it. And if you, as a parent, find yourself overwhelmed and unable to create those spaces, um, reach out to other trusted adults. If you have siblings, if there's aunts, uncles, teachers, friends that you have, people, other adults that could potentially give your child another space, ask them to maybe help out. I have an aunt and uncle if my parents had reached out and been like, can you take the kids out for a day away from all the stress because it's been a hectic week and just talk with them and see if they're okay. That might have given me the opportunity to kind of talk about it, especially if it was a regular thing. So yeah, just be gentle. Don't expect them to be okay, and give them the chance to not be okay as well.
I think that's excellent advice. And I am glad to hear you encourage parents to look for other people that can provide support to the healthy or the typical children. My most favorite memories are times when I was out of the house, when I was away from the chaos, away from the death, and was in a place where people asked me questions about me instead of asking me, how's your mom? How's your dad? How's your brother Mario? How's your brother David? Alicia, how are you? I remember being asked that question and not being sure how to answer because I had not been asked that question before. I remember being a little girl and just being shocked. And over time, building trust with some other adults so that I could share, well, this is how I am and this is how I'm feeling. Or the other thing that happened is that one family in particular, I didn't have the words to articulate at that age how I was feeling or what I was going through. But because they were not overwhelmed by the chaos, they had the capacity to see that I wasn't okay. And so they did what they could to help. And those were just these kind of bursts of sunshine moments that I can look back on in my growing up years and be thankful for that. And I think that parents sometimes have this idea that they have to do it all. They have to be good at everything and are reluctant to let us be helped by other people. And it's such a mistake because it can change a life.
Yeah, and I mean, the parents are also in a very, very tough spot, and they can't be expected to do everything. I mean, even if you have a perfectly healthy and normal child, the saying goes, it takes a village, and that's double the case if you have something complicated going on. One caveat that I want to add, which might, I don't know if that's universal or not. It might be due to the fact that my sister is adopted, but sometimes when I didn't have those moments with other adults, I was being babysat for like a week, a week away, but with family members. I would have to end up defending my sibling, because those adults were also frustrated with the situation. They saw the harm it was doing sometimes, but instead of kind of stepping in and offering help, they would sometimes say things like, she's not your real sister. Or, is that easier if she's not, biologically related to you? And as a little kid, again, and that was my little sister, I was very protective. So I often didn't feel like I could tell them something was on, that I was struggling, that was difficult because, that was my sister and they were making comments negatively about her. So I didn't want to add to that. So I'd often say, no, I am okay. And, yeah, it's different, but she's still my sister. But that was because people were kind of automatically being negative about the sibling. And it's such a complex emotion to have a sibling with disability. You do love them, but you're also being hurt by them. But if you, as an adult, go in and be like, oh, didn't you wish that your parents hadn't adopted her? Your instinct is still going to be, I'm going to protect my sibling here because it's your sibling. So that accidentally does the opposite of what they might have been wanting to do. The adults in my surroundings have gotten much better at not doing that. But yeah, it's definitely something, you might see that the kid is struggling, but don't try and start a conversation with an attack on the sibling or by dismissing the sibling, because that will not help.
Such ignorance.
Yeah, it usually came from most people in my life are really good people, but some decisions were made that clearly weren't based on a lot of knowledge.
Oh, again, excellent advice. When you were receiving therapy, uh,
Mhm.
you said that your therapist diagnosed you as having complex PTSD.
Yeah.
I think that most of the world is familiar with what PTSD is because of what our soldiers go through and what they endure. I'm not sure that they're familiar with complex PTSD. Would you explain to us what that is?
It's a diagnosis that I don't usually share with people in my life. I tell them I have anxiety because of what you said. You hear PTSD and you look at me and you're like, well, you didn't go to a war zone. So what are you talking about? And it's true, I didn't. The complex part of it is very important. It means that for a prolonged period of time, a continuous period of time, I experienced extreme stress without any relief. It means that my nervous system was just dysregulated for continuous periods of time, which has, as a result, made it very difficult for me to regulate it normally. It's so used to horrible situations that it will jump to horrible conclusions. Even if I rationally know something's not a big deal, my body is just so trained to be in that fight or flight and that panic response that it will fall into that very quickly. So it's definitely not like in the movies where I hear a loud sound and I have a panic attack. It's more that I will go into prolonged states of anxiety where my mind is fuddled, I can't think, I am stressed, my heart rate's up, I'm shaky, I'm sweaty, and I can still perform tasks, I can still study. But the longer that attack goes on, the harder it becomes to breathe, the harder it becomes to communicate until it falls into a panic attack and I'm hyperventilating. Um, for a period when it was really bad, I had to keep a diary every time it happened. And so there were multiple attacks on the day. I had to describe them, the severity of them. So it really does become debilitating at that point because a simple task of trying to study for an exam or having a confrontation with someone, not necessarily anything big, can just send you into this massive panic. Um, I have also become very distrustful and paranoid of certain people because of bad experiences. I am a little paranoid. I get very protective because worst case scenario is just a very probable scenario. So that means that when interacting with people, that often becomes more obvious that I might be very shy and hesitant because I don't fully trust their intentions and I struggle to read some of them. So it's a bit tricky to describe because unless you experience it or see a full blown attack of it, I come across as a perfectly normal individual. I hold down a job. I've graduated a master's. I have a social circle. So I don't look like someone who struggles with these things. But that's because I'm putting in a ton of effort to manage my nervous system because I put in all the time and effort to give it healthy outlets so it doesn't panic.
It takes a tremendous amount of emotional energy to manage these things. And it's this undercurrent. I kind of compare us to ducks. On the surface of the water, they're calm, they're peaceful, they're floating, but underneath is the paddling and the work that no one can see. But above what everybody sees is this peaceful, beautiful duck that's on the water. I feel like sometimes that's an apt description for what we're trying to do in order to regulate our emotions.
Good, albeit a little bit graphic, maybe, or triggering example from my life is when things got really bad. The only way I could somehow calm myself down enough to be able to think rationally and function was self harm. That pain. I never had an intention to, pass away or anything like that. But that sharp sense of pain would bring me back down to earth. So that's obviously not a healthy way to cope with anything. Now that the situation around me has calmed down a lot, um, that anxiety doesn't spike as bad. I still need a shock to get out. However, now it's jumping into a cold body of water, it's taking a cold shower, it's doing some intense exercise, it's finding a boxing ball and knocking that until I can't anymore. So it's that intense release of energy that needs to happen. But I didn't get there until I essentially removed myself entirely from my family, moved to a different country, went through years of therapy. I was on medication for a while. So you had to go through so many steps to just be able to get it to a level where you can manage it in such a healthy way. And it's still something I have to do regularly. So it just shows like, yeah, it's this quirky thing. She does this and that. And it's like, no, it's because if I don't, I panic. So I kind of need to do these things, and it's not as frequent and it's not as disruptive anymore. But it is something that is necessary in day-to-day life now.
I'm so thankful that you found these outlets and that they're helpful. What a gift. That's beautiful.
It does. Yeah. It's nice when you start finding things that work for you.
Yeah. No, we just have a couple of minutes left. Sadly, I feel like I could talk to you forever. Um, is there anything else that you would like to share that you haven't shared already?
Well, maybe just a big thank you to everyone that has participated in the subreddit. I think it was honestly part of my healing journey, seeing these people, other people going through the same things. And not only seeing people go through the same things, but seeing others comment and be supportive and being so kind and so understanding. And for people to trust the space to tell these deeply complicated and negative emotions and to put them out there for us to read. It's not an easy thing to do. And I'm incredibly grateful for those who've decided to share, for those who've decided to comment, for those who've decided to read. You're not alone. And that's something that has definitely been proven. And I think Alicia has done an amazing job at proving that as well. She has allowed a community to be grown just by starting the conversation alone. No one was doing that. And I think we need to keep talking about it. We need to keep being there for each other. We need to keep growing the community, whether that is online, in person. It doesn't matter. Just, yeah, as long as we keep talking about it, we're going to get more resources and the next generation will have it even easier and easier and easier until it is a commonly understood thing that receives the support it deserves.
So well said. Thank you. Thank you. This has been just an absolute joy to meet you in person online this way and to talk and to hear your story. Thank you so much for being here and for being part of this.
Thank you for making it possible from the TED Talk until here and for your participation in the community as well. Yeah, you're making a difference in the lives of many, and a lot of people probably are being affected by you that you might never know about. And yeah, you're really an inspiration.
After hearing Nope's story, pause and reflect. On the outside, Nope had it all together, but inside, she was carrying invisible wounds, self-harm, the ache of unworthiness, and complex PTSD. And still, Nope chose healing. The Glass Children community she created isn't just a subreddit, it's a lifeline, a place where thousands of people now know they are not alone. Nope's story reminds us healing means you no longer have to hide. And when one glass child finds their voice, they help the rest of us find ours too. How are you feeling? Remember, if you're struggling, reach out to a mental health professional. You do not have to do this alone. Thank you for being with me today, and don't forget to share this episode with your bestie, your therapist, your teachers, your minister. Sharing is caring, and hearing is healing. This is the I See Glass Children podcast. I'm Alicia Meneses-Maples, and I see you. God sees you, and Jesus loves you.